Welcome to our Innovations exhibition. Today me and Bula are going to present our product and what we made, and how we made it, and what we did.
Alright, so what made us interested in this project? Both me and Alec are interested in podcasts, and we wanted to learn more about what goes on in the background and behind the scenes of producing good quality podcasts, and what makes good sound quality, and what makes an engaging conversation.
Yeah, so me and Bula like to listen to podcasts during our free time and when we're studying. So we related to our persona. We kind of made this podcast for ourselves and for other people, so we can listen to it when we want, when we're doing things. That's why we wanted to, create it and make it the best it can be.
Our inquiry statement is, how do we create a podcast with episodes from 5 to 10 minutes long whilst keeping the audience entertained?
Alright, so here's some of our research. These are just two examples. What topics are popular within podcasts and what techniques can we learn to ensure the podcast be the best it can be. And so the main goals of our research was to understand the concept of a perfect podcast. This was so we could, make the perfect podcast. So we took some inspiration, as you can see here. We took inspiration from the Impulsive podcast and from the podcast with, I think it's Dana White. I'm not sure. But we took inspiration from those podcasts and we compared our podcast and our drafts to theirs to make the best that we could. Take inspiration to put into practice, which is a key thing we needed to do. And then we had to find the key elements of podcast creation, which we listed below here. As you can see, it says being relatable, prioritize quality, and promote your podcast on various websites and with your peers.
What were the most challenging and rewarding aspects of this project? So some of the most challenging parts were having a clear audio and a good microphone, because we had to experiment a lot with the microphone settings to make everyone in the podcast have a clear and loud enough sound so the audience can hear it clearly enough. And we wanted to find a good special guest, because we realized in our mid-project critique our special guest were some of our friends, and we realized that they're not really special because they don't have a lot of experience in the topic. And so we found, for the next episode, we found Ms. Gorman, which has a lot more things to talk about and a lot more expertise in her field. And that's what we found really rewarding, to see the final episode come together and us learning more about podcast creation.
What was our podcast about and why do we create it? So our podcast was created to increase exposure towards athletics here at ISADL. We brought Ms. Gorman on as our special guest in our podcast because, as you may know, she's been a PE teacher for many years and she's been in multiple sports teams. We also were speaking about Ms. Gorman's past and how she made her way into the athletics field. So the things she did to accomplish and make her way into the athletics field here at ISADL. And then we wanted to inform the audience about the past and the experiences of former athletics teachers. Ms. Gorman is no longer a PE teacher, and what they've been through and how they ended up here at ISADL, so people can maybe take inspiration from them or learn from them, learn from the things they did.
And what did we learn? And what so we learned many different skills of production skills, like sound editing and how to interview our guests, and speaking clearly, fluently, and confidently, and on the spot. And we would attempt to have clearer audio so that the audience can hear us better, and maybe set up multiple microphones so that all of our voices are clearly heard in the recording. So
We're gonna play you a snippet of our podcast.
Yes, done a lot of coaching. Basketball is my favorite, and that was one I coached since my first. Actually, before I was even a teacher, I was coaching kids when I was a high school student, and basketball is my favorite. I spent most of my hours doing that. I also coached volleyball, and I coached softball, and all to girls. And the reason I'm just going to throw this in, the reason I coached to girls is because I felt like they deserved good coaches as much as the guys. And when I was growing up, it was all about the boys and not the girls in doing sports.
yeah.
So you talked about your childhood.
Yeah, so the question might have been cut off, but we asked what if she's been in any sports teams and why she decided to coach them. So that's what her answer was. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Will you take some questions?
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Which innovations class did you guys run?
We take English innovations.
Okay.
How much of the final podcast was scripted, like prepared questions in advance versus impromptu on the spot?
All of our questions were prepared in advance, but sometimes she responds with answers we also have to come up with on the spot. But we did plan ahead, so all of our questions were written down before. But we also made maybe 1 or 2 questions up on the spot. But yeah, it was all planned, scripted. But her answers obviously weren't planned. Those were
When you were doing your research, did you find a benchmark, like which podcasts might you take as a benchmark for your?
Yeah, we looked at the Joe Rogan podcast, as he always has a special guest come on the show, and we thought that's really interesting and pretty cool. We wanted to kind of implement that into our own podcast because we thought that's pretty engaging. Because I like to listen to that podcast, so yeah, we thought that's interesting to hear about different people on the show, which is good.
Is there anything about your podcasts that make them yours?
Well, we have our own topic. We have a special guest. I mean, our podcast is kind of revolving around the ISL athletics, so maybe that makes it our own. But we took inspiration, obviously, and the setup and how we created it was kind of just taken from different bits of multiple podcasts, like Impulsive and the Joe Rogan podcast. So,
Yeah.
Sorry, you may have answered this, but I was doing the register earlier. How did you decide on the content, or why did you decide to interview Ms. Gorman, and what would your next podcast be? Who would you interview, or what topic would it be on?
all right.
So we decided on topics by kind of seeing what most of people our age are kind of interested in, and we also did another episode about phone usage and screen time, which I thought was quite a modern day topic and pretty important. So, and also the sports in ISL community, which a lot of people are contributed in. So we thought that's a good topic to talk about because it can gather a large audience for them to relate to.
Did you post it anywhere, or you
No.
just kept it for class?
Yeah, we just kept it for.
If you had to identify one skill that you're taking away from this work, then what might that be?
I think maybe just speaking with a good flow, maybe during podcasts and speaking confidently. Because before, I didn't really like to speak on the spot or speak to people during questioning or interviewing. So I think I've learned how to interview people, ask them questions, and respond with good answers.
Yeah, I also think that kind of speaking, I guess public speaking, helped me kind of be more fluent in what I say and make something what I say kind of worthy and important to the topic. So I think speak on the spot.
Thank you, guys.